Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, has made video game news for a number of reasons this week, not the least of which is because reviews are generally favorable, I'd say.
Yeah.
Alessandro Filari here at GameSpot reviewed it. You can go check out his review on GameSpot. He liked it a lot. He thinks the game does some really great stuff, and I agree. I beat it Sunday night. I've been playing through. It's weird because looking at this does not, the definition of indie is always kind of morphing. It's not, people misuse it all the time, but this is an independent studio, Ninja Theory, who previously the last thing they did was the DMC remake. Was that the last thing?
Yeah.
Before that, Heavenly Sword. They did character action combat games, and I think going into this, a lot of people thought they'd do the same thing, but this is more of, a lot of people are saying it's like a visual novel, almost like walking simulator-ish with combat elements and puzzle solving stuff.
I thought the visual novel, not comparison, I guess, that observation was really interesting because like the traditional idea of a visual novel is usually like, text on screen, character icon. But I like bending that definition a little bit. And that's definitely the vibe that I get starting this game out. I mean, you're really like, I was listening very intently because I didn't turn on subtitles because I'm dumb. And it really captured my attention right from the very beginning.
Yeah. I have a bunch of questions about this, but I do want to... Pete, you're like maybe halfway through based on what I saw you playing today.
Oh, really?
I beat it in 6 hours. No, a little less than halfway. You're almost to the halfway mark.
How many? So is it just those two paths?
No.
to choose from?
Sorry, yeah. Now that I think of it, you're less than halfway.
Okay.
So you beat those two, and that is like halfway.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's cool because like you have, and then you have live action stuff like this. They have really great. They used Unreal Engine actually back at GDC 2015. I think they did a demo. When Tim Sweeney, is that correct? Epic.
That's the name. Yeah.
Yeah, he went on stage to show off the actor for this, who actually was the video editor who did a lot of their video marketing and in-game cutscene editing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Tamim Antonionades, I think I'm correct pronouncing that correctly. He's at their studio in Cambridge. They tapped her to help them out with the facial capture and acting early on in the process, telling her that she was just a stand-in for that actor, but they actually were... She was the actor, and they didn't really tell her until after, but she did an awesome job, so they kept her on. So that is who you see doing all this motion cap.
What's the value of that? Not telling her.
Sorry. It wasn't like the plan right away. They literally had her as a stand-in. They're like, this could go somewhere.
Oh, because she was probably doing a great job.
She did awesome. Yeah. Which it's a tough character to portray. I mean,
hell yeah.
One of the other huge aspects of this game is that. Ninja Theory is pretty upfront with the fact that they are portraying this girl who has, what would he now call psychosis? Although obviously this is, I don't even know what you want to call it, like 8th century Celts. Although when the Vikings came to Orkney, which is where the game is based off, like Orkney Celts, Germanic tribes north of like Hadrian's Wall in England. When the Vikings kind of took over that area, the Vikings became the prevalent tribes in the 9th century. So this is maybe even like early 9th century. This is all kind of just like boring historical stuff, but it's kind of relevant because she's part of a Celtic tribe. She's a Celtic warrior. This is Senua. But the mythology that is kind of paralleling her journey here is all Norse.
Yeah, they're talking...
Thor, Odin, Loki, Freyr.
They talk a lot about the Northmen, which, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I just can't get enough of. So I was already like so on board. And then you have that added aspect of what I think a lot of people would interpret as schizophrenia, and they're very upfront. I mean, like even the opening credits has like mental health advisor, which so it was like that blend of things is just so cool to me. You don't see that a lot.
Yeah, there's a trigger warning at the beginning of the game saying a lot of this could be bad stuff for people who potentially like. I mean, psychosis can be a symptom of a lot of things. It can be a symptom of depression. It can be a symptom of bipolar disorder, like really, really bad anxiety. But like you said, I think what she would have is the closest to what we'd call schizophrenia today, but Ninja Theory was careful not to label it.
Right.
But
which I appreciate.
Yeah, so you see the puzzles here in the real world. I actually want to compare these puzzles to another game, but if I said that, it would actually kind of spoil the other game. I'm not trying to be purposely elusive, but I don't know if you guys know what game I'm talking about from last year.
Yeah.
So you're doing these puzzles, and part of the coolest thing in my opinion, and actually Goobshoe Riot, unofficial, official GameSpot #1 fan, he tweeted at me today for a question in the lobby saying, are you going to talk about this game's portrayal of mental illness? And we're doing a reboot episode on it. I will say I think it's really, really authentic and empathetic approach to portraying mental illness. They consulted a bunch of people from University of Cambridge, psychiatrists and like mental health experts.
I mean, they were like the first names in the credits. Too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And like I said, right after that trigger warning, it said you can go to hellbladehelp.info. And I thought it would be like a game specifically for the game, but it's them just redirecting a bunch of different people to international suicide hotlines, depression outlets, and whatnot. So they took it very seriously, and it shows. So you see combat right here. People are calling it, there's a question about whether it's Dark Souls. We'll get into that. But you see her, she's addressing the camera, and they use binaural audio, which kind of, this game is best played with headphones.
You got to play it with headphones,
Yeah.
And you hear voices from either side. Again, that's part of her psychosis. You can hear voices. Hallucinations are big, but also the delusion aspect of this game. People with psychosis will start making connections in the world that other people would see as coincidence and kind of be paranoid about them. In this game, that's how the puzzle come into play. She sees connections in the world that like triggered this. That it's kind of like this hyper creativity, and it's really, I think the game does a good job of implementing that.
I feel like two minds about it, because I think the idea of finding those false connections and making them seem real, that's effective. But I like, you saw me struggling with one this morning. I feel like it's in certain cases drawn out to the point where it's like, hey, I got it.
Yeah.
You don't need to be wasting my time making me do this in ways where I'm like folding in on myself trying to do it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so much of what this game does is great in the immediacy of how effective it can be, that I feel like those things kind of slowed me down to the point where I was like, I'm no longer engaging with this character. I'm engaging with puzzle design. And that's not what, for the most part, this game seems to be doing, or at least that's not where its strengths lie. But man, like, so I was playing in that section you saw today, and I noticed these little glimmers of light, like on a tree, and I thought, oh, that's weird. Maybe that's like texture pop in or something like that.
Yeah.
And they were so fleeting. They would like be there 1 second and gone the next. Like when I tried to actually focus on it, when I did actually get the chance to focus on it, I realized it was projected video of eyeballs.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like it looks like light because the pupil is so big and there's only so much white of the eye left on the video they're projecting.
Damn.
That it looks like something like that. But like even details that you might not even consciously be aware of are seeping into your head. It's just like,
Yeah.
Damn. It's like you said, there's something to be said, apart from what they're trying to do and depict with this character, I do think the puzzle solving can be pretty drawn out and dry after you get it.
yeah.
I think they do push it too far.
a little bit.
Gameplay wise. It fits, but it does kind of hurt the pacing.
Yeah.
The combat as well later on, there's a few kind of mechanics that you can spam. I was telling you about it. It's one of those things where once I discovered one thing to do against a specific enemy, I was like, damn, I wish I didn't know this. I don't know if it was an oversight on their part, but it becomes repetitive when you figure these things out, but we can get more into the combat. I think the combat is satisfying and functional, but I don't necessarily think it's fantastic.
I think it's functional. Like I would give it that. I mean, like it's just so not the point to me where I just kind of considered it. Like I think the most notable thing about the combat is the environment in which it takes place is really haunting, at least from what I've played. It's really disturbing, and that imagery is really effective. And so the fact that I'm just kind of spamming one thing is not really what I'm thinking about anyway, and I'm kind of glad for that. Like I don't want to have to think too hard about the combat. Because the other thing about Senua as a character is that she's very... She has so much fear in her face when you see her, and she seems lost in a lot of ways, and I think that's part of her character as well. That I think that the fact that I'm just kind of like square is almost appropriate for her. Like I don't mind it. Like I saw some people on Twitter kind of being like, the combat really turned me off, but I just don't like, if you're playing this game for the combat, then I think your stuff is flying over your head, or you're not really looking at the right things.
Yeah.
There didn't seem to be. I have only played probably like an hour, 2 hours, but there was no like tutorial or explanation of really anything, right?
Right, and it leaves some things that you can do up to you to discover beyond just simply attacking and blocking, like combinations of inputs that you wouldn't think.
So you just
yeah.
okay. So the more
The running
that's
Achilles.
Yeah.
I got accidental combos for sure.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I feel like the spamming is like a result of that, right? Like I'm in the thick of it. I'm just gonna like
Sorta.
mess around, but like that's nice to hear. At least like along the way, you start realizing like, oh, okay, combos like
Yeah,
fall
and
out
even
of it.
parrying and stuff. And like once you
Right.
see that, then it almost the combat then falls into that sort of like puzzle-y sort of engagement where you're looking for tells and you're trying to react as quickly as possible and that sort of thing.
Yeah, DFW Gamer on YouTube was saying, someone else was asking, saying the combat is kind of like a mix between God of War and Dark Souls. It's limited to the small areas in which you fight, though. I forgot to mention that. You can't just always swing your sword. Senua will literally pull her sword out at specific combat areas.
Right.
Once you know you've killed everybody and you're done with that wave of enemies or boss, which she'll sheath her sword and then move on to the next kind of story-driven 20 minutes, half hour, or puzzle solving for the next 20 minutes, half hour. I guess we could ask that. Okay, Jean-Luc, I'm sorry, this is out of order. Actually, no. Okay, I'll go in order. So Redfield on Twitter, sorry, I'm looking at our run of show. Redfield on Twitter said, how would you best describe the overall flow or feel of gameplay? I know it's a tired method, but what contemporaries does it most compare to? So DFW Gamer on YouTube just mentioned the new God of War. I believe he means the upcoming one, and that's actually the first thing I thought of. They're going from that third-person character action, like Devil May Cry almost, that Ninja Theory made, to what the new God of War looks like, over-the-shoulder melee combat as opposed to just freestanding camera. I think that's an apt comparison. I think God of War looks like it might be a little more in-depth, but it does feel weird because the camera's fixed over her shoulder. And you're fighting people. You're not like rotating the camera.
And sometimes
you're
enemies
flicking
will
the
get
analog
behind
stick.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the audio figures into that because her voice will say, "Look out behind you." And that's really cool too.
That's so cool. And like the fixed camera, also, you always have a blind spot with that,
Right.
like no matter
Yeah.
what. And I love that because a lot of this game is about perspective
and
what
tunnel
you,
vision.
what you see and what you don't see. And I always feel slightly unsafe. Which I like, but it's definitely, it was, at first I was like, this is weird. Like, I'm not used to this at all.
Yeah.
And sorry, Rob, one more thing. 84 Jester X, before it disappears off my chat on YouTube, said, I'm surprised no one's mentioning Heavenly Sword. Yeah, it's similar, but that was more like Devil May Cry, like character action, right?
I didn't play it, but yeah, from what I understand, yeah, it was not as like focused as this game.
Same developer, Ninja Theory, and then people are mentioning Kai from Heavenly Sword looks a bit like Naruto. I wonder if, Kai from Heavenly Sword looks a bit like Senua. I wonder if it's like the woad paintings, like Celtic tribes stuff. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, just on the combat, like the little I played yesterday or last night, I had a really hard time with this game. Like among the take on psychosis and like, really making you uncomfortable, but like I had a bug in like with the first combat encounter that like, probably if not the most important encounter where you're like kind of allowed or like you have that freedom to kind of see what the buttons do. Like, oh my God, the camera got stuck in a fence.
Damn.
I was like pushed back into a fence
sucks.
and I like was blindly doing shit and was stuck there for a while. Like I think I even died there, but like I don't know, there's something about that moment where maybe just like in my own head along with other voices like yelling at me. I don't know, that was really hard. But I just had a hard time getting into it, and people have been saying this, like, this game is not for everyone. I will continue to play, but it's just intense.
Yeah, it's tough
all the way through. Like it's hard. It's hard to play.
It's a hard game to explain, like just because it's also, we'll get more into like the AAA versus indie or pricing model stuff. And also there's a massive thing that I'm kind of hesitant to bring up, but I think it's in the public eye enough that I'm not spoiling anything anymore.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Because there's a really good discussion to be had with it.
And we don't know if it's a legitimate thing or not yet. Essentially, I think we can say the game tells you that permadeath is a thing.
Yeah.
And the way that it handles it is unusual, perhaps by circumstance or by
I think we could talk about, it's right at the beginning of the game, so I think we could talk about what the game is telling you, right? Like, and what we've tried out.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if you have this thing, this rot, and if you die enough times, it will slowly crawl up your body until it eventually infects your brain, and hey, you're dead.
Wipe your save file.
Wipe your save file.
According to the screen that comes up, it says Senua will succumb to the rot, and all your progress will be lost. I'm assuming if you wanted to avoid that, you could upload to the cloud.
Yeah. It's the power of the cloud.
Yes, but then we tried it out.
Avoiding death.
Alessandro, when he was reviewing it just for like pragmatism, was trying it out, and it didn't affect him. He died. He purposely died. Like how many times? Like he was like
multiple times.
He was saying he died a bunch.
And there's videos on YouTube of people pushing it to like I think 50 deaths.
Yeah. So I think it's in the public eye enough. But then, like Ninja Theory is saying, no, it's a thing.
I think that's. So I'm pretty sure that's the truth. They said that. Like PR responded to someone and said like, oh, it's probably a bug. Actually,
yeah.
What I heard was that it's like there are many different ways you can die in this game, right? And there are different areas that can and cannot facilitate to it. So like, there was one area, I won't tell you what, but I heard that it's a really tough area, but it's just like a traversal aspect.
Yeah.
And you can die based on the environment.
I fell off a branch today.
So like, if you think about it like from a design point, like you wouldn't want to implement that there, in that you don't want to discourage someone who just can't get their mind around it, right?
Potentially,
but
I feel like this game takes enough risks that I wouldn't be surprised if they took
They
a
just do it.
mechanical risk. Yeah.
Yeah, this game, they do a lot of things. I mean, we talked about putting psychosis at the center of it in terms of gameplay and the characterization and being upfront about it is one thing. And then you get into...
I mean, yeah, like the guy who was dying, he was dying in a fight, who did it 50 times. Right?
Yeah.
So
It's not
like...
fair. But
So the rot was growing up my arm, but I think it
Right.
got to like my shoulder before I finished. Because I was playing on the auto difficulty. It's got like a Resident Evil 4-ish auto scaling. The better you
Yeah.
do, the harder it'll get. But then you can also put easy, medium, hard, or whatever.
I do want to say, like, regardless of whether it's true, I think creating that tension is cool. Like, I think
Yeah.
the idea of the finality of it and, I mean, talking about the combat and how people have mixed feelings about the combat, I think part of my impulse to spam was being like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Yeah.
And I think that even if it's not true, even if the game is telling you this, because I mean, this is an unreliable narrator, right? This is a story with somebody who doesn't always see things as they are, and hears voices that aren't there. And so, I mean, I think regardless of whether it actually happens or not, it's a cool thing to introduce that introduces another layer of tension besides the voice in one ear and the horrible chanting ahead of you and the dead bodies hanging from trees. It creates another dimension to it, and I think I mean I know a lot of people are mad about it for some reason, but I think it's interesting.
Irrational fear, irrational like dread and growing despair is huge to her character, and it kind of makes you feel that way too, which is
Also like
crazy.
just. I mean, even
great.
for if you don't have something as extreme as psychosis, like I mean, just like day-to-day anxiety is like just the feeling of being like there's danger around the corner, like your body being like beware, and you're being like no body, there's no danger, and your body's like, but what if you died right now?
What if a stranger wants to talk to you and has a question and says hi?
Yeah.
Like, oh my god.
Yeah. What if something bad happens? So
That's something bad happening to me. A stranger talking to me when I didn't want it.
Yeah, so even in the chat right now, the Twitch chat, Azrarillion says, GameSpot, apparently you have to die in several different places for the permadeath to work. And then a bad player said permadeath was disproven. So I don't...
It's unclear, and I think that first theory is curious to me, but again, that would seem to not fall in line with what the game is telling you. I think this is really interesting for Ninja Theory because they're at a crossroads where they can say, all right, guys, everyone thinks that this thing is one way or the other.
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah, like they can either confirm that they are as clever as everyone thinks or say, actually, we screwed up. But thanks for thinking of us in that, in that way.
I would love to see
Did
them
you
stick their
switch
guns.
to permadeath switch?
Bill, God damn it, Bill.
Yeah, I don't know if this is what you're saying. I would love for them to just stick their guns and be like, no, it can happen. Don't fucking...
That's kind of...
Don't test me.
That's kind of what I'm saying, but they have to... But if the question posed to them is, why is there so much proof that it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
What do they say to that?
Yeah.
Like, it's either you're not doing it right, which then I'd say, then you didn't explain it properly, or it was a bug, or it doesn't happen.
Or failure is not what you think. Ooh, like,
Or it's all case study. And they're just interested to like, let's mess
very
with
least, like, we're talking about it now. We have no idea. So people playing the game are like, shit, I don't know if this is going to happen. If I replay the game, it would still, even unless it was completely disproven and they said something, I would still go into the game if I replayed it and be like, ugh, kind of uneasy if I played on the hardest
Happened
difficulty.
to me.
Yeah.
I think we can segue into the next part of this topic, which is the AAA AA,
Yeah.
because I really want to talk about how incredible this game looks. The production qualities are that which we don't see very often. Like I often think of Metal Gear Solid 5 as having some of the best character modeling, animation, lighting, and camera work and scene composition out there for games specifically because games are sort of a bit behind Hollywood. But this takes things to a level that makes you feel such a personal connection to the character, and everything is so unreal but real. Like it's the lighting, it's the texture work, it's the animations. It's all there, And I can't think of another video game that at the best moments of Hellblade that looks as good as Hellblade.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
I will say that I expected the dead bodies to have more detail.
It is a weird,
I was
yes.
expecting them a little too closely, and they looked kind of like.
The corpses look like a PS2 HD upgrade.
For some reason,
like
the corpses don't look as good as everything else, but like, oh my god, just being in the forest and like I was getting distracted just looking around.
Well, it's these moments too, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the sort of thing where I can't. It's CG, right? But you could tell me it's not, and I'd say, wow, that was pretty good post effect work.
I mean, and they also have FMV. I don't think I've seen any yet myself, but don't they have some?
It's
of that?
that guy.
Yeah,
It's
well,
that guy that sort
okay.
of fades in and talks to you. And
Several characters
Like,
later on.
You
Yeah.
combine that, and they're so like, alongside like effects and like neat composition that it's not so blatant. You know what I mean? It's not like here's a cutscene now.
Oh yeah.
Everything is so seamless and consistent, right? Like I don't think there are the only loading times is or if you like die, right? Like I don't know. It's
Yeah, and that's very important to the experience of being on this journey with someone. Like, it's a very different beast than Shadow of War, but the same thing applies. Like, if you're trying to invest a character in this fantasy, they need to have as few barriers as possible to engage with it and be a part of it. And this game, for the most part, ensures that that's the case all the time.
It's interesting that Lawbreakers came out the same day because
Oh.
No, sorry, to go back to the pricing stuff. AAA,
Yeah.
AAA like $30. They're both $30,
Right.
And like it's a 6 to 8 hour game. I think I beat it in about 6 hours. It felt longer than that because of the oppression of the story, but I do think that sets an interesting precedent. It's always like, why do we price games $60 by default if like, it's going to be this long or there's going to be this much to do or it's going to be, this much replay value. It's always kind of this gray area, and it kind of hopefully sets an interesting precedent for that conversation in the future with this level of production in games.
No publisher would have funded this game.
Sure.
I can't imagine anyone brought this to an EA or a Warner Brothers and they'd be like, yeah, we want a dark and brooding, examination of
Can I get a
personal
sample?
anguish.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Let me play a little bit of it. Yeah, I love this.
Yeah,
So-
it's like this is.
what kind of DLC do you got planned for that?
Yeah,
You
I know. Like
Yeah.
this is the kind of thing where like I know this is exactly the shit I do like. Like this game, like you could have told me like, oh, Callie, they made a game specifically for you to enjoy,
Right.
and I'd be like, oh yeah, sorry, I'll give you some money for that.
Right.
Sorry, nobody funded this. Like I would believe you if you said like they had a really hard time getting people to want it because it just is. It's so specific. But I think also so relatable.
I think that there's a sense of authorship, even though you couldn't credit it to maybe one person or another. But it feels like there's a vision here that is just it's allowed to do everything that the people behind it want it to do, and it reminds me of something like The Last Guardian in terms of that feeling of playing a game that is more than just a product to sit on a shelf to sell to gamers.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is in a sense a work of art that is authoritative in what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Jean-Luc, I am going to skip over one question and go back to it. Sorry. But I do have a question in regards to this kind of AAA model. Luigi Wagner, who has submitted a few questions to the lobby throughout the months we've been going. Thank you very much. Could Hellblade's production model signal the birth of a new tier of games, as in smaller AAAs that aren't constantly worrying about action? I think we kind of covered that, but I think that is a very relevant question for this game.
And it's one that'll be examined on GameSpot. We've got something coming up.
Cool.
in the
Oh,
future.
yeah. Specifically about Hellblade, right? Yeah.
And this topic as well about birthing a new category, if you will.
Cool. Yeah. Luigi Wagner, thank you again. And then I'm going to go back to it. One more question, kind of that I skipped over about the combat. Joseph Lee on Twitter said, thinking about buying Hellblade, but heard the combat is watered down Souls, repetitive, and the big pro is the story. Thoughts? I think Dark Souls is a bad comparison. I think that's the kind of knee-jerk reaction to like dodge and blocking based melee combat.
Right, yeah.
No, I think this is very different.
I mean, those elements are there.
And maybe like the fact that they don't tutorial everything and you kind of figure out a few things yourself. That
Right.
might factor into the Dark Souls comparison.
Yeah, but as someone who sucks at Dark Souls, I think I can sort of maybe speak a little bit to the different levels of challenge that exist. Like Dark Souls is in a sense meant to be a game that you kind of need to like fail a few times before you really understand what it is you need to do. And this game, failure is pretty hard.
Yeah.
You don't get punished for not being right the first, second, or even third time.
Yeah.
So it's not as demanding, and I think that's really more the Souls thing, is how punishing it can be.
Yeah. Joseph Lee, thank you for your question. Redfield, Luigi Wagner as well. Anything else on Hellblade before we go on to Lawbreakers?
Yeah, wear headphones for sure.
Yeah, if you can.
There were some freaky moments in the best way where it's like I think one of the characters like talking to you like from right ear to left, and it felt like he was legitimately pacing in the back of your head.
Which is literally what they did during the recording sessions. There's a really cool feature on the main menu of the game that you can watch.
Maybe
What?
It's making
Really?
that thing, yeah.
The binaural audio capture device literally is this black cylinder with fake plastic ears on the side that actually captures sound through the contours of a human ear.
Oh yeah, it's
Pretty cool.
wild.
And they'll
Yeah.
lunge at it and kind of circle it. It's really cool to watch.
Man, I missed that. I missed the trigger warning at the beginning. Like I was like, woo, corpses. Like
If I can give any practical advice, it'd be to sit close to a monitor when you're playing it, because having the headphones and then having just your view only be this game, not like on a couch like 15 feet away. Having that right in front of my face, like a foot away, also helped with immersion
imagine
quite a
VR.
bit. Right.
that could be potentially dangerous. Like I would freak
That could
out
be
a lot.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Imagine VR games must use similar audio, or maybe they will.
Well, they use similar. Yeah, there's some games that use similar audio techniques, and VR is actually being used at USC to treat things like mental illness and PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in effect, like stuff like this is bad, but it can also, it's potentially bad.
When
used with the proper direction, very effective.
Yeah.
At treating people.
One minor note, not to get heavy, but yeah, this game is super, like, with the psychosis aspects and everything, the trigger warning is kind of essential at the beginning. It is a tough game to get through, especially if you've seen this stuff up close. All this stuff fucking sucks to deal with, but I do strongly advocate trying this game out because it is a very empathetic and very understanding and very, frankly, authentic portrayal of this kind of stuff. And the fact that, like, this young of a medium is doing it so well as opposed to, like, you have movies like some of my favorite ones deal with stuff. Silver Linings Playbook, Punch Drunk Love, Melancholia, that stuff all touches on it, but, not just for a video game, but for any kind of entertainment or art form. This is a really, really powerful portrayal.
It's really nice to see something about mental illness. And some of my favorite depictions, or I wouldn't say favorite, but the most important ones to me have been in games. But it's just nice to see it not portrayed as being crazy. It is very empathetic, and I
Or
think
comic relief. Or anything.
Yeah, there's no like, she's
Right.
dumb and weird, like which does sometimes happen in other stories about mental illness. And so it's exercise caution, of course, if it's something that you think will be difficult for you, but I think it's worth experiencing.